Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 10th PowerKit AI webinar session. Like I say all the time, thank you for coming back if you've been to one of these sessions before, and welcome if this is your first time. We're just really happy to help you build an AI-ready organization, as we say. Okay, so I am one of your hosts, Ashley. I'm going to be in the back helping with polling and questions and any updates that you guys might need. And then we have our speaker, Dwayne Robinson, and I'll allow him to introduce himself.
Hey everyone, I'm Dwayne Robinson, and we also have licensing royalty in the form of my Gwen joining us as well, and she'll be available in some of the Q&A as well. So just know that we're here to help with all those licensing questions and help give you guys some insight. So, well, first off, I'll give a quick introduction of myself. I am Dwayne Robinson. I am principal Copilot architect in Copilot Studio. I work in the PowerCat team and work closely with engineering and such to be able to make sure that all of these product gaps, all these things that we're running into, that we help our most strategic customers be able to get past that. But we also work in conjunction with making sure that the product gaps are understood by our product team and making sure that those things are getting into the product. If you are interested in connecting with me, you can scan the QR code here and it will take you over to all the different social links and things like that. I am pretty active on those social links to be able to give you things. I don't spam people, but what I tend to do is make sure that you know whenever we have something significant, like one of these webinars. You'll find that I also am on YouTube and do like the Copilot Studio dude stuff. And I have a whole bunch of educational content that is out and available. And you're seeing a lot more coming because of the fact that we're past build now. So I have a lot of things I can talk about that I couldn't talk about before. So definitely looking forward to connecting with you guys. So if you wish to do that, feel free to scan that and take a look at it. And I'll put that QR code up again a little later as well. So let's first get started with Copilot Studio and just in general, what Copilot Studio is. For those that don't know, Copilot Studio is our solution that we provide. It's an end-to-end SaaS, and what we offer with it is the ability to integrate with our first-party Copilot products and be able to extend them. But we also use it in different ways. We also have the ability to build your own custom agents, and those are different types of agents. We have agents that are what I would say are synchronous and autonomous. And so what we mean by that is we have ones that you're chatting with back and forth, but then we also have ones that when something happens, it just goes and does the things it needs to do. Kind of think of sort of like Power Automate, but imagine that I could do that in a way where it doesn't have to follow the if-then type of context. It can actually understand what's going on and all the tools and knowledge at its disposal and be able to take action. Now, the other thing is that you're going to see that there's a lot of integration that we have with Azure as well. So a lot of people ask, should you use Copilot Studio or should you use like Azure AI Foundry? The answer is yes, you should use both. You should use them for what they are intended for, because with Copilot Studio as a SaaS-based platform, we are by default the conversational orchestrator that you would want to use for building your own custom agents. So that doesn't mean that you wouldn't have a piece of an agent that you want to build in Azure AI Foundry. And you're going to find that that's why some of the licensing cost and why this can be a little complex is because what we're doing is we're giving you a platform that you can configure for all these different scenarios. And depending on the scenario you're coming in at, will really depend on how you're going to need to license the product. So let's take a look a little bit, let's kind of double click this at the Agentic Ecosystem, because in order to understand licensing, we have to be able to understand what common terminology and what is it that we're talking about. So when we look across the board, we have all these different implementations that you can have. So if you look at Copilot Chat, or what we're going to call Copilot Chat, this is basically the enterprise version of like a Chat GPT type of scenario where what we're able to do is make a safe enterprise chat where you're not necessarily training someone's model, or if you tell it that you want to ask it how to optimize some source code, you're not taking that source code and putting it out on the internet, right? You're actually doing that within the context of your organization. So this gives a lot of controls, and that is extensible with Copilot Studio to add more capabilities in. As we move to the right, from the left to the right here, we're going to talk about Copilot for M365. And this is, a lot of people just call this Copilot all the time, but in the sense, this is the personal productivity capabilities. This has typically got a SKU associated to it that is a per user SKU that you buy within your organization. And what it does is it takes Copilot Chat, which is doing everything based off of the internet's knowledge. Now it's going to bring your own knowledge from the this graph to bear, and it turns it into this ability to be personal productivity and offering your ability to do extensibilities. And there's a lot of things that are included inside of that box, and we'll talk about that as part of some of the licensing. Then we get into agents, and when we get into these Microsoft agents, this is where you use Copilot Studio to create these agents, and it allows you to be able to create agents in numerous different ways. You can say, hey, I'd like to be able to extend the M365 Copilot and just do something where all I'm going to do is add a prompt over that data. So I can say, hey, I'd like to build a focused agent that's going to help with people preparing for job interviews or something like this, and ground it within the data for the corporate information about internal job questions and things of that nature. So we have that capability, but then we also have the ability to go into a full custom agent. And when we start talking about custom agent in this space, this is where we're going to start letting you connect it to all your different backend data systems like Salesforce and ServiceNow, and or connect it to MCP servers and all of this. And if you don't know what I mean by MCP servers, Model Context Protocol, and all of that, if you're interested in things like that, definitely subscribe to the webinar series, because we're going to keep doing more and more content on things like this. So definitely know that Copilot Studio is going to have that capability to build those really custom agents. And now think about those agents being both things that you can chat with live, or they can actually go and do stuff behind the scenes for you. And so those agent capabilities can also be augmented and extended by Azure AI Foundry and different Azure components. So if you wanted to have your own custom model, we're going to have the ability for you to be able to do that. If you're wanting to use something beyond what's just in the SaaS service itself that's packaged up, you're going to have that capability. And so with that, we also can connect to third-party services. This is where I go into MCP or Model Context Protocol, or we get into the connector library that's going to be inside of Copilot Studio or inside the Power Platform. We have all of these different capabilities to bring all of this to bear. So that's why your licensing can be a little complex, depends on what you're trying to do. And you're going to see as we go into this that we're going to talk about this to a certain level. And because of this vast capability that we're having inside of Copilot Studio, what you're starting to see is that we're getting mass adoption of Copilot Studio across the board. We have over 230,000 organizations that are using Copilot Studio to date. And so when they're using it and how they're using it, it depends on how you might go about licensing it. So let's kind of dive in and let's start with the basics, right? Let's start with the basics, which is going to start with build messages. And what is a build message, right? So in Copilot Studio, a build message is the currency that you use inside of Copilot Studio. So when you think about the consumption metric, we're going to refer to that as a message. And the message is that going to be that unit of measure that we're going to incur cost by doing these, by using Copilot Studio. Now, there's a key thing here that these messages are incurred or being used and being billed versus non-billed messages. So the build messages are going to be the ones in your production environments, the ones that you're actually using. So as a maker, when you're testing, you're in the test canvas, you're not really accruing message cost that's associated to it because you haven't published it, you haven't made it available to your users. So know that there is a difference whenever you are talking about a build message versus just a regular message. So when in the context of this conversation and what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about licensing, it's primarily everything we're going to be talking about today is going to be about build messages and how we can do this. Now, it was really the only way we can incorporate some sort of counter for you to be able to have a think of it as a way to be able to bill you for this. We had to come up with a standard mechanism to do this. And not everything is going to cost one message. You're going to see that different things cost different messages, volume or different message counts depending on what you're trying to do inside a Copilot Studio. And there are different ways that you can purchase those. So we're going to talk through all of that today. All right. So let's jump into the first part. Let's just talk about agent activity and the billing rates that are associated with agent activity. So first of all, what do I mean by agent activity? What I mean by agent activity is that I want the runtime of the agent to do something. I'm asking an agent to do something, so therefore I'm going to incorporate a build message for doing this. Now, in order to do this, we have three different real ways that you can potentially be seeing the way that you're going to interact. So when I'm going to start doing this, then you can see we've got all these different things on the left-hand side, which is going to talk about the different types of activity that can be happening inside of Copilot Studio. And then the chart on the right, you'll see the column headers. And what that is depends on what is the way that you are intending to license it. Like, are you licensed for certain things and such, right? And there's also an orchestration model. And so when we talk about the orchestration model, let's kind of start with that. So in orchestration, what we mean by orchestration is there's two different ways. There's a way for us to orchestrate with a traditional NLU. It used to be the default for Copilot Studio. It is not any longer. So that's what we would refer to as classic. But when we start talking about generative, at that point, we are using generative AI to be able to figure out which topic, which thing you want to, which tool you want to call upon in order to service the user and be able to do this. This is the more modern way of doing it and has become the default in Copilot Studio as a build. We have converted over to this is the way we expect most people to use things. And so you'll see that that will have an effect on potentially your message count. So let's start going down the column on the far left and let's talk about the different activities and then walk our way across how these things are basically billed whenever you do this. Now, when I start with web grounded answers, which is going to be, let's see, maybe I nifty laser pointer. Can you guys see my laser pointer? Any thumbs up? Yep. Okay. So when we're looking at web grounded answers are basically going to be where we're going to generate the answer to a question using something like a website to be able to do this. Now, when we're talking about this, we're talking about like a public website. And on the back end, what we're doing when we go to go do web grounded answers, we could answer the question using the model's knowledge. We can answer the question grounded on some sort of web content that we have. And just know that when we're talking about SharePoint, it's different with SharePoint because it's not really web. It's really over like documents and things of that nature. But when we talk about web grounded answers, both in classic and in generative mode, what's going to happen is depending on if you're using the M365 Copilot, which we talked about earlier, right? When you're doing this, in that, it's included in that with that license. So that means if you're paying for that $30 MSRP SKU that gets you the M365 Copilot, it's included in that box. The same thing happens on Copilot Chat. So Copilot Chat, again, doesn't cost an organization anything. This is what I would refer to as our freemium SKU, right? And it allows us to be able to do this for organizations where every organization should go turn this on now because of the fact that you're not, otherwise your users could be running out and using ChatGPT or something like that on the web, and they're using those to be able to do things, and you could be losing data. And so what you're starting to see is this is a great scenario that we offer. Now, if you're talking about a completely non-authenticated user to your organization and you're wanting to do this and you created like a Copilot agent um, inside of Copilot Studio and you wanted to put it on your website and answer questions about your website, for example, that's where you're going to see that this will charge you 2 messages to do it, to be able to pull this off. So just be aware, it depends on what kind of user we're talking about, will incorporate this. Now, as I move down, and don't worry, we're going to stop for questions and things as we go. We're going to have classic answers. Now, classic answers is only going to be available in classic mode across the board. And when you think about this, these are predefined responses for you. So in other words, this is the old school way that I create a topic. Here are 5 different ways to be able to trigger this thing. And here's what I want you to say whenever you say that. In the case of the M365 Copilot, you're going to see it's included. If you're doing Copilot chat, it'll cost you 1 message. And if you're doing a non-authenticated user, it will cost you 1 message. So this is a value add of the M365 Copilot SKU, is that we do not charge you those messages for that whenever you use this. On generative answers is where we're going to dynamically generate responses off of knowledge sources and be able to answer the question. So when we think about this, if you've ever played inside a Copilot Studio, you know that we can add knowledge. We can say, here's a SharePoint library. Here's, you can do websites, you can do Dataverse. There's all these different places that you can go put things. Well, specifically in non-graph grounded, and what I mean by that is we're talking about non-Office 365 content like SharePoint locations. What you're going to find is that we can generate these and answer questions both in classic and in generative here. And in these cases, we have the ability to include it. It's included as part of the M365 Copilot license. And you will then see that if you were doing extensibility and you wanted to do this for Copilot Chat, then you're going to have a 2 message count. And the same thing happens on non-authenticated users. Now, when we look at the tenant graph grounding for messages, so what we mean by this is that there is using the Office graph to be able to do the search component and store the data and things of this nature. So when we're looking at this, this is going to give you the information out of the M365 backend, and be aware that there's a major work effort that's happening where we are doing searching and indexing and vectorization of data that you're putting up into the graph to optimize that search so that it's optimized for an AI response. For us to do that, there's a lot of cost that's associated to that to be able to pull that together. And traditionally, back in the day, we only did this for the M365 Copilot, and it was always included as part of that. But making that available for you, if you said, maybe I have some frontline workers that I want to make that available to, I don't want to pay for that full SKU, but I still want to get that quality of response that I would have gotten from the M365 Copilot's ability to search and index that content. And so with that, what you're going to see is that's why this goes up to a 10 message count. So, and if you do it in the Copilot chat or you do it in non-authenticated, to generate that response over that, we will need to be able to do that at 10 messages. So the last part that I want to kind of talk about is going to be an agent action. And an agent action, otherwise known as a tool, is where I am going to use like a topic, or I'm going to use an action, which is basically like I'm going to call some sort of API and use a conversational wrapper that's around the connector that I have to be able to answer questions. So an example of this would be if you wanted to create a service desk ticket, as an example, and you needed to call out to the ServiceNow API to create yourself something like a service desk ticket. A lot of times you'll see any type of post action or is going to do this post or patch actions. You'll also see that you can use get actions as well for certain scenarios where you want to go get information from the API. But the point is that these particular items, whenever you're doing those, they're also included in the M365 Copilot license for the channels in which you're using the M365 Copilot. So what you'll see here is a trend down that whole column, that all these capabilities are included. There's a lot of value in that M365 Copilot license for people who are trying to make really good experiences through the M365 Copilot. But as you expect, as we move into Copilot Chat, because we're adding more complexity and we're doing things beyond our normal capability over just web grounded, what you're going to see is that you're going to have 5 messages that are the cost associated to it. So you can do it, but it'll cost you 5. And the same thing on non-authenticated users if you're going to use it in this way. Now, just to be clear, this non-authenticated users, what we're really talking about there are specifically custom agent implementations inside of Copilot Studio. Okay, so that means that they're not M365 Copilot authenticated. They don't have that license. So just make sure that we're all on the same page. Now, one other thing that we'll go into, and then we're going to talk about a few more minor things for you guys to be aware of, is that we talked about activities, and then now let's talk about AI tools. Because one of the things that we wanted to do is make it where you don't have to come up with all these different SKUs that you have to keep up with, or all these different metrics that you have to keep up with. Like you used to have like AI builder credits and things like that. We were moving and standardizing to messages as the unit of measure across the board. So in this case, what we're talking about here is when you want to use different AI tools in Copilot Studio. So when we're looking at this, we have these built-in capabilities or these integrations that will allow you to do this. So traditionally, if you thought about AI Builder, we used to have this ability to have like a text and generative AI tools to be able to call and do your own custom prompts. And to be able to do that, you used to have to go out and buy AI Builder credits. But now what we've done is we've simplified this down for you. And what we're allowing you to be able to do is we've classified the different models that are available into basic, standard, and premium. And then when you want to use this, you're going to see that these have these different cost associations with them. Now, you're going to see across the board here that none of the AI tools, depending on how you have licensed up here, these are all going to be consumption-based SKUs. You're going to see that when you use a basic one, you're going to get a 1 message charge. When you use a standard one, you'll get a 15 message charge. And then when you do a premium, you're going to get 100 messages charged. Now, be aware that what we have here is this is the message rate per 10 responses. So when we talk about this, it's basically, think of it that you're going to have the ability to get 10 responses back in order to hit this cost metric. So just be aware that this is how you handle the AI Builder credits in the future. And then content processing tools. This is to extract information and custom models perform pulling, like, think of it in this case, we're wanting to extract data from documents or things of that nature. When we want to do these type of actions, this is only available in Classic, and this is going to be an 8 message charge. So just be aware that this does exist in you. If you have that need, you can do it. Now, agent flow actions, this is the message rate per 100 flow actions. Now, what do we mean by this? If you think about Copilot Studio, now we have the ability to have flows. And these agentic flows, what we're looking at here is to think of it as Power Automate, but it's Power Automate being licensed by messages in a sense, right? So when we have these flows, you can have up to 100 flow actions or And when you do these flow actions, these are what your costs are going to be. You're going to get 13 messages for every 100 flow actions that you hit. So just be aware, this is how we are changing this to go into message consumption as the mechanism for AI tools specifically. And I've got one last one here for you just to look at, just so that you guys can see. I'm not going to drain this slide for you, but just be aware that as you go through each of these different things on the AI Builder capability on the left, you're going to see what the actual cost is on the right for you to be able to consume this. So just be aware, we've got all these new capabilities that are built in and all these different processing pieces. And what we're doing is we're making those into a message consumption mechanism. And we're working to make sure that you guys can look at this and figure out what is your actual consumption going to be. And there, if you work with your Copilot Studio or your low code uh, seller, then you will find that they have access to tools and calculators to help you calculate what you think your workload is going to be. And then know that we are also making it where you can report these out in your billing so that you can see it. So now let's just take a look at some examples here. So if I had something where I went through and I said, I'm going to have this is what my activity view looked like. I might have something where I want to call the weather and get a response, and that's going to give me a 5 message cost because I called an action, and that's going to be the result. I could also have a situation where what I'm going to do is call a knowledge source, and that knowledge source is actually using graph grounding as the backend. So I've got a document over in SharePoint. That would be the 2 messages to generate the response, followed by the 10 messages that for the graph grounding. And then when we just called a website and wanted to answer the questions, that's going to be a 2-message type of scenario. And then maybe I call a custom API or a custom topic that I've created to call backend API or something of this nature. That's going to have a 5-message association with it. And then when we could then end up calling yet another piece of knowledge, again, not grounded, and then of course grounded and such. So if the whole conversation all kind of came together here, you would add up the cost that's associated to all of this, and that would be your message cost for this particular implementation. So hopefully this is making some sense. Now, there's one last piece before we get into kind of questions on this piece, and that is going to be just be aware that Dataverse capacity does come with Copilot Studio across whenever you start with an implementation, and depending on what you have as far as different things that you've already got allocated as part of when you build, just know that if you haven't gotten anything else and you just buy Copilot Studio, what you're going to end up with is these are the default per tenant that you're going to get of Dataverse consumption here. So you're going to have a lot of capability here with Dataverse. And then, yes, you would need to purchase additional Dataverse storage if you are going to go over these different capabilities. All right, so let's talk about the different purchasing options. And let's kind of talk about this. So messages and message packs, we're going to, first of all, just be aware that messages are sold in packs, or you can buy them in a prepaid way. So you can say, I want to prepay for those in packs of 25,000 messages. And that we'll get into the MSRP cost in US dollars in just a little bit for this, but just think of it that I want to buy a message pack. I can buy 25,000 messages in a message pack, and that's per month. So you can then say, how many of those do I need per month? And that is a prepaid SKU. It's a use it or lose it type of situation. So you use it that month or you don't. We don't. We do not give you back if you bought 2 message packs and you only use 25,000 messages, you're not going to get credits, and it doesn't roll over to next month or anything like that. With the pay as you go, this is where what we're going to do is sell you messages on a per message basis, and we're going to build that against your Azure Mac agreement. And so that will get billed to you every single month in this way. Now, we can configure these things in combinations. So one of the cool things that we can do is we see a lot of people doing these where they go and they say, hey, I'm going to actually buy a whole bunch of prepaid capacity. And then what I want to do is not allocate it all. I want to keep some of it as spares in the background in case someone goes over, because I don't want to use prepay or the pay as you go, because I'm worried about whether or not people will go way over or something like that. So in the case that you're looking at that, this would be that people will take message packs and they will not allocate them to an environment and keep them as spares in the background. So that way you can say, hey, I'm going to take message. Let's say I had one message pack. I could go to environment one and give them 1,000, give another one 5,000, and keep the rest of them in reserve. And then if somebody went over, I could go and I start seeing that they're going over their consumption. I can go allocate the rest of the messages according to where I need them to go and keep some capacity on tap if I want to stay completely in prepaid. Now, we also have a combination of prepaid with Azure Burst. And what this would mean is that, let's say that I go and I want to buy prepay, purchase some SKUs of message packs. And then if I go over that, I just want to be charged out of my Azure consumption for that on the back end, so that it would burst into Azure in the case that I have an overage situation. So these are common configurations that we actually see with different people. Now, you may say, well, why would I do prepay and keep it as a spare? A lot of people do that because you have to go through procurement in order to be able to do that, and they don't want to do the Azure piece or the pay-as-you-go piece. So what they need is they need a way to make sure that they reduce risk, because we do have enforcement turned on, which if you keep running over your consumption for a consistent period, eventually once you start exceeding your capacity, we'll start turning off the service for you. So just people use that as a mechanism, as a safety mechanism, because what if they need to do that and it takes them and it takes their procurement department, 120 days to be able to process something. So things like that you might want to think about. So let's look at this and the different ways that you can pay as you go, or the different options that you can purchase. And what I want you to kind of see is that we have the Copilot Studio pay-as-you-go meter, which we can do. And a lot of people like this particular one. You'll see that it is, and again, all of these, when I talk about pricing, it's US dollars and it's the MSRP. It's not with your discount. It's probably, if you work for certain organizations, depends on your level of discount. You have to talk to your actual sales people to be able to do this. We just want to give you sort of an understanding of what it says on the website what the MSRP is. So when we look at this, and if you don't know what I mean by MSRP, Microsoft suggested retail price. So, or manufacturer suggested retail price. So with this, what you're going to see is that if you are buying per message on Copilot Studio using your pay-as-you-go with Azure, you're going to see a 1 cent per message charge by default for each message that you have. So when you go back and you look at all these different things, you're going to see that it's one of those things that takes 5 messages is 5 cents to be able to do it. So, and then you can see that going down the path, not much really changes except this one column right here. Now we have up here, we have some other things that are changing, but just know that between this and this, which is the message pack and the pay-as-you-go, the main difference is a message pack is $200 and you get 25,000 messages in the message pack. And you're going to see that both of these are the same basic answer. But when we go into the M365 Copilot SKU, this is the $30 per user per month SKU that people will purchase for like the M365 Copilot. Now, when we go and we do this, it comes with some benefits for you to be able to go down. So you basically get, inside of the messages, you basically get an unlimited set of messages that go in that you're going to be able to have. Now, when you get into generative AI, there are some limitations. And if you remember, we had the charts before that gave you the information on where are those limitations, where did we actually charge you for messages. But you'll notice that a lot of things that were even generative AI were included inside of that SKU. So there's a lot of value inside of that SKU. Then as we move down, you'll see here that these two you can basically publish anywhere. In the case of this, you're only really able to publish in the M365 Copilot channels. So what does that mean? That means, Teams or the M365 Copilot itself application is where you're going to be consuming it. So imagine it is where you interact with the M365 Copilot as an interface. That is where you will be using this this particular capability. If you go outside of those channels, it's not an all-you-can-eat buffet because you're not using your license for the M365 Copilot. So you have to be coming through M365 Copilot to be able to get this the advantages of the M365 Copilot license. And as you can see, pretty much across the board, you will see here the minor change on the Power Automate cloud flows is that currently today, it looks like we're offering that in a message pack subscription. And then you'll see over here that this is really the only real way to do the cloud flows as an action. All right. Now, let's talk about the cost again. So again, the major cost here is you're going to have your pay-as-you-go meter. And again, you're going to have a SKU that you can purchase. The pricing is going to be 1 cent for you to be able to do that per message. Then you're going to have this down here, which is the message pack subscription for Copilot Studio. $200 per pack per month. One message pack equals 25,000 messages. And you'll see here's a per tenant, per environment via billing plans on these different ones. So just be aware that these will get charged per environment. This will get charged on a per tenant. So if you want to break up your 25,000 messages across multiple environments, you can do this. In this case, we just show you the environment that consumed it. Now, there's one last thing that I want to kind of bring up, and this is like the biggest thing that people forget to do, and that is there is an actual license for the author for authoring or being a maker in Copilot Studio. And the cost of it is for the low introductory price of only free. But the issue is that you have to get these as part of when you want to be able to build. So when you want someone to be able to be a maker, you need to make sure that this is part of your plan. It's unfortunately, incredibly common that people will leave this SKU off of their purchase. And then they'll try to go and build, and they'll realize they can't build. They can't actually make it where people can make stuff. So just be aware that you should make sure that you're getting these licenses as part of what you're going after with them being free. And you need to allocate those licenses to the correct users that you want to be authors of Copilot Studio in your environment. And again, these are generally part of your agreement with us. So you need to make sure that these are included because you don't want to then have a change request that you have to go do right after you completed a purchase. So just be aware this is incredibly common that people forget this. Please don't forget it on your side because it is a free SKU.
Thank you guys for participating and joining. But yeah, so have a good evening. I say this every time. Have a good evening, morning, afternoon, and night, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.